So when you're dealing with much heavier objects, and as a result you want to stiffen up the box that it goes in, the perfect thing is to go to your plywood kind of guillotines or contour braces. Especially since you can lock in the back ones with wood glue and screws, and even attach in the front. If you're doing very, very heavy things, you can get more surface area for your foam and a great deal more strength by going with a box beam style brace. So we'll go ahead and cover different ways that you can attach foam to these next. So what we talked about earlier in terms of when you're finding that form, the problem is always how to relate that to the actual dimensions and plane of the yoke or guillotine itself. So that's why working straight off something that slides in there can be really good. And you can either do the trace kind of thing that I did earlier. Another option, though, that you have is to use a piece of cardboard, do a rough cut that gets you close, and then since you're using typically you'd have a glue gun fired up when you're doing this. Take advantage of the fact you've got a glue gun, because basically you can cut a bunch of little pieces of cardboard, put a bead of glue, just stick it on there and slide it into place. If they get too close, sometimes you can even this matches here, this matches, you can even overlap for that part in the middle. Then basically that does a super accurate form of what you've got, and you just trace this onto your plywood. You can then take the foam you're going to use to cut it and subtract that. All right, once we're reasonably confident about the shape we're gonna have there, and we want to attach some foam, you kind of immediately foresee a problem that you've got a fair amount of weight that you're holding with this, but you've got a fairly small amount of surface area. If you're doing 2 inches on this, you can see that's not going to be terribly stable. In fact, it's not going to be stable at all. Even going 1 inch, if only that thick, which you do see those just glued that way, I'm never comfortable with that. What you can do, though, is to broaden out your area of foam contact in a couple different ways. The first one is to go ahead and just use more foam. We want to get something closer to this or this in terms of contact area. And the one way to do that is to glue down a strip that goes across here and then cut it to fit. And you'll do this on both sides. And then you can come in and glue a broader strip to the face of it and trim it all up. So that's what you end up with. The nice thing about that too is the fact that you have this foam around here means that you can have something to tuck into. The whole Tyvek tuck is a very, very nice thing. If you need to come in here and say maybe instead of subtractive you've got to a place where you cut too much, you need to put in a little wedge or do some building, you can do that, and it will be hidden by the Tyvek tuck, which is a beautiful thing. And in doing that, there's a couple options about how to approach it. One is that when you glue this in initially, you're going to shoot a bead of glue here, but not the outer edge. So you'd glue around here, but not all the way out. And doing that will leave you with a way to do a sort of general tuck over the whole thing, the whole shape that you've got, whatever it is. So that's pretty beautiful. That's pretty nice. If you're concerned about that, don't feel like that's enough glue, and you really are concerned about reinforcing this more, and maybe you're using 2.2 instead of this is 1.7 for the sake of demonstration. The other thing you can do is by having this be broad enough, you can just do a standard kind of tuck where you make a cut that echoes that shape, and then you can come in and tuck it, and it looks pretty beautiful too. So that's going to come around and cover your cushion material. So if you do have something heavy or sometimes a complex shape, you can always, the good thing about having something solid like this is you can add to it. You can actually add separate braces if you need to that come up and do other things, but also you can just broaden this contact area in a little bit more of an affirmative way. And the nice thing about this is you can do it just by using wood blocks. The nice thing about this is since you have a glue gun, you basically can get it and do any adjustment that you want to do. Either you can push it a little bit if you want to move the foam that way, you could back it up a little bit. So the foam will give up to a certain point and then stop. And the idea would be you'd get all this figured out and basically glue these in place before you screw them. So you just a shot of glue on there, push in place, a shot of glue on there. You get them all stuck on there. It'll hold it in place for you. So you then go back with your screws. So you get the best of both worlds. And so that's kind of like what you're going to be doing in a normal situation. This is, I should point out, that this is all where this is kind of a primary box. If we were trying to lock this in place, then and have this be an inner box and contained in an outer crate, then we'd have a couple different approaches. All right, now we're going to talk about a method for much larger things. If we're using plywood, that already implies some weight, but when you get to another scale, you still have the foam contact issue, but also just the strength issue that can come in. So this is going to be a scaled down version, obviously. So you just have to keep in mind the proportions are going to be somewhat different. But it's really, it's fairly straightforward. So we're going to we have our guillotine here marked out. We're using the same kind of, transfer method to get our pattern. And then we're going to cut it just the same way that we would with the other. But in this case, what we have, you see the two screws, we're going to cut two at the same time. So 2 pieces of 1/2 inch, or in some cases it could even be thinner, because we're going to put them together to make basically a box beam style brace. So one cut, and then of course we'll separate these, and there'll be a nice match that will separate with strips of wood. So we'll end up with something broader like that. It'll be incredibly strong. All right, so basically you're going to box in the edges, get any place where you can make a rectangle or a solid shape to strengthen it's good. Remember, this is out of scale. These could be 2x4s or 2x3s, or even potentially 1xs that are thicker. Just depends on what you need. I've seen them up to 2x6s in this part, put together with the skin, and so we've got all of the perimeter all boxed in. And then here, just so we don't have just 2 floating pieces of contoured plywood to attach to, we put in these blocks that line the 2 up. You can even take them and put them crossways in areas that are larger, to give yourself larger surface areas for either attaching foam or getting a little more fancy. So there's our box beam brace put together. Anybody who knows anything about box beams is like, for architecture, for building purposes, they're amazingly strong. For the strength to weight ratio is pretty impressive. And so we've got a nice strip of wood around here, which is really handy. You can see the blocks. We can have we have the cross blocks where we have something to attach our foam to as we put it in there. So this is an option as you get bigger to consider. So obviously when you're using this kind of beam, a brace, the box beam style, it's going to be something pretty massive. It could be a giant stone. That's where I've used them. And there in particular, you want to be able to strengthen the box as much as possible, because you can only do so much without putting railroad ties up the side of your crate or whatever. And by isolating these planes in here, you're strengthening the whole thing a massive amount. So in this case, you might be actually going through, you find your middle, go through, pre-drill a little bit, and be lagging in. Or in some cases, if it's going to travel some, you might actually be bolting and putting bolt plates here and possibly even recessed into the side of this. So it's all, you can replicate it basically. Okay, so on our guillotines or yoke braces or contour braces, there's one thing that is common to all of them as far as I'm concerned. It's sort of a general notion, and that is that anything that you can secure, you do secure. So on a foam type of brace, go ahead and glue these in the back. I mean, for one thing, it just keeps it from being as confusing. It keeps them from getting out of sync, out of register, makes it less of a puzzle. It means something can't get lost. So there's always that benefit. But in addition to that, it strengthens things a bit, especially when it comes to dealing with the wood. You know, as things get heavier. Here's our little sample plywood brace here. Especially in this case, you've got a cross plane back here that you're screwing into place, and that rigidifies it significantly. So even if you're leaving this entirely loose up here, you've really strengthened the box a lot. One easy way to make sure to do that and to make sure you're hitting it, because it's kind of narrow and you want to hit it pretty much dead on, is when you have your rails that are set up like that, you know, go ahead and screw them from the inside and pop them all the way through, and you'll see the mark. So then you can, you know, potentially put a little wood glue on them, slide them back into place, and screw them, and you know, you're dead on. It's a done deal. You can, in fact, if you want to, go ahead and attach the front ones as well. You just need to make sure people know it's removable. Obviously, you need to do a circle or whatever kind of key you want to use. So those are the variations that I'm most familiar with using contour packing, especially in crates. Varies from the lightweight foam, which normally you'd be using a 2.2 pound. I normally wouldn't do it with a lighter foam, up to plywood, and then finally up to a box beam style.